So we talked about this as an executive committee, just to make sure that every time that we come together, we reinforce why we're here, what our mission is, what we're doing, why we're doing it, how it relates to the rest of the state, and really how it relates to the health of our region and how we're working together. So you'll see this slide consistently every time we meet, just so that we can reinforce what our mission is, you know, that we are locally diverse. Everyone that is here at the table or online has been chosen to represent a specific user group or agency or organization. And we all have different perspectives, and that's what will make this a well-rounded, robust strategy for the region, is that we're not all going to see things in the same way. We're not all going to agree on the same things, but that's why we all need to be here and be together to create this strategy. How are you recording in here? You just joined us.
Stupid otter. I don't know.
It's
Stop it. I canceled it. I don't even know how I got it.
Robots.
Right?
Taking over.
It'll be like, get ready for the meeting. I'm like, stop. I'm so sorry. I will look into it again.
So if there, actually, before we move on from this, another thing that we talked about as an executive committee that I want to share with you all is taking some time to do like a meet and greet, or just like a mixer, so that we, outside of this like rigorous planning that we're doing, have a chance to get to talk to each other and learn about each other's values and things like that. And so would like to, and I would like to combine that with a stakeholder update, and so make that a public event. And that way, all of you who are part of the roundtable can also be in the room and answer questions or give your feedback, and just really help with solidifying this process. So we'll look to do that in some coming months. I don't know if there's a better time, like spring, April-ish, maybe, to do something like that, if anyone has any preferences.
Spring when you get a little bit heating outside, part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you have ideas for venue as well, you know, I know that we had talked early on, at least, kind of back and forth via email about doing things like field trips or being able to meet at different sites, you know, not just being exclusively here, although this is a great spot. So if anybody has any ideas on venues, please email me or call me or text me or whatever. And I will work on putting that together.
Okay. Well, we're back at it. And we're going to continue to basically write this plan here together. And so we have our 4 topics, just as a review of where we're headed, where we've been with the project. And so outdoor recreation use and impacts. We have one goal left to develop strategies for around multiple use on that topic. And then we're going to move into equitable access to outdoor recreation. And if we just sail through that, we can maybe get started on reviewing the goals for topic 3. So the way that we've been doing this is we review the goals. You know, I basically write these goals based on the osmosis that I've had over here and, you know, working on outdoor rec for the past couple of years. And also from all the meeting notes that Michelle and others have compiled and sent my way. I'm halfway through maybe over halfway through the stakeholder interviews. So we're doing around 20 stakeholder interviews, about halfway through that. Of actually conducting the interviews. I've got 3 more set up tomorrow, so that's another piece of information that only I have right now, but I'm gonna write a summary report, so that's kind of starting to accumulate and percolate through my mind. But anyway, so I write these goals and then we review them and we've made changes to most of the goals, the draft goals that I've written so far. And so we'll do that and then we'll work into strategies. How do we implement them? So we did have kind of a reality check schedule change. We just really, we realized we probably weren't gonna get through all this. Initially, we had 3 meetings programmed. And this is one of these things where we just keep, kind of learning how, as we go, we're learning as we go to some degree on this process. It's a new process. And, so we've proposed a couple more meetings. One, February 18th is the same thing, Tuesdays at 2, kind of sticking with the same schedule, and then March 25th. Those are new. So I don't know how people feel about that.
You should have gotten invites for those already.
Yeah, so anyways, that's what we decided. April 15th is still the same, I think. We just sort of have kind of admitted to ourselves, it's gonna take us a little bit longer to get through goals and strategies. Give ourselves some more time. Hey, if we finish on February 18th and we don't need that meeting on the 25th, maybe we can accelerate this thing.
Thanks for skipping spring break week as well in there.
Yeah, we had to figure out that one. We did skip
Yeah.
spring break. I'm a big fan of spring break, I gotta go down to South Padre and party.
Daytona Beach.
We'll see you guys down there. So, yeah. So that's the schedule. That's kind of the housekeeping part of it, but, so I guess what we'll do here, and then we can just we'll just take one more look here at what how we go about this and what we're producing and how far we're gonna get now versus in the late stages of this. So goals are what we want to achieve. They're pretty simple statements. Strategies are how we're gonna get there. And strategies can be all over the place in terms of how detailed they are, but they're generally pretty, it's like a task list that you would give to your management level employee in some ways. There's a lot to figure out on how, to execute those strategies. And that's why one of the last steps for this group is going to be the action planning component of it. And that's probably the one time that we'll break up into groups for a while, just so that we can get more of those action plans done. And that's more the task list for who's going to do this and how are we going to pay for it and that sort of thing. So we're going to compile all this information into a professional quality plan, and I'm taking responsibility for producing it, but we're just going to write it as we go. So all this that happens in this meeting is headed toward producing this plan, which is going to be an important tool for the region and for this group going forward in terms of getting a plan for how we're going to address some of these impacts and meet some of our ambitious goals. So we're going to go back here to the just a quick. I just want to point out, we are writing these strategies, right? I don't think we probably should go through and review these strategies and wordsmith them more from from what I have here, because we can do that toward the end in that the wrap up meeting in March. We can do some of that, and then again in April, we look at re-examining the strategies. But these conversations have led to these strategies, and then I'm making notes that I think are more action steps that come out of the meetings. So I'm sort of categorizing the input and putting it, in plan form. So this is actually starting to come together. If people really want to review those strategies, we could. I just think we're tight enough on time that we should just keep moving. And then I can produce the whole thing, all the goals, all the strategies, because a lot of the strategies are going to implement multiple goals And there's gonna be overlap and redundancy and that sort of stuff that we can get rid of when we compile it all together, and then we can rethink about strategies. So we're on this goal under the first topic about multiple use, and our input from this is really, it's predictable, but it's also endlessly interesting to me. One thing that occurred to me is, so this multiple use, it was kind of a lukewarm reception to it. When we brought it up last time, we might have been getting tired. But also it's like multiple uses. It's a mandate to some degree, it's a management policy. One of the things I think is really important to remember, given that this is Montezuma County, Dolores County is our region, and those counties, is that multiple use has got to be part of this. Because the counties, county commissioners, they represent their constituents, and you have constituents that are using public lands in all different ways in both of these counties. So that's kind of why this ended up in here, because we've got county representation. That's why the goal ended up in the plan, and it's kind of why we need to address it. There's two different kind of perspectives on it. One is, the one perspective really came from the Montelores stakeholder session one notes from that, and that is really a lot of comments about how recreation is, the implication is that recreationists are having negative impacts, especially on, grazing operators out there in an obvious way, and probably others that are trying to do resource type work as well, I'm guessing. And so there's sort of a desire from that part of that wing of multiple use to like, please help us manage recreationists, they're messing us up out there. And then it very quickly goes into motorized, non-motorized. Like that is its own sort of subset, I guess, in some ways of multiple use, but it goes there quickly because the uses that are perceived to be most protected by multiple use policies, I think, also are require, if you're operating, if you're grazing operation, it's real nice to be able to drive around where you're doing that. It's not absolutely necessary. It's a lot harder if you can't drive around. So, and similar with timber and the other things. So, it just ends up sort of being two different camps, sort of multiple use, I guess. And then there's increasingly throughout my career, more momentum, more desire to sort of segregate uses. That's maybe not the right. It's more like zoning, like these kind of uses over here, these kind of uses over here that conflict. It's like industrial use and residential use or something like that, like trying to zone out different areas, and that's happened, right? There's trails that are non-motorized and trails that are for multiple use, et cetera. So that's what is behind all this. And I guess given all that, we kind of have this responsibility in this group to, in the context of an outdoor recreation and conservation strategy, plan for multiple use. So we did edit this goal. It was more direct, like support multiple use or something like that, and we edited it to continue to collaborate with public land managers for multiple use. And so the question is, how do we do that? Given the problems and that we're into this motorized, non-motorized tension, which is waxing and waning kind of all the time.
I really like that we included so much of the education with cattle, and I really think that all came from you and one of the early stakeholder meetings, which really appreciate. That because it was captured in the stakeholder meetings, not so much in the OREC plan, and that's a good thing, but I'm not sure that we're capturing habitat and wildlife protection in multiple use as much.
I think some of the mapping that
Janet's willing to do through CPW is gonna capture some of that, and that's something that we always deal with when we're developing any new trails or timber projects or any type of new use. So we have the tools to identify those wildlife impacts, but certainly recreation is going to have a longer term impact on wildlife in certain areas than maybe a timber project may have, because that timber project is a snap through a year or two, whereas that recreation footprint's gonna be there for a long time.
It is. So wildlife. Help me understand how wildlife, I mean, how it fits into multiple use. I always think of it as an impact, like an EIS thing.
Well-
As a management strategy, how does it?
Yeah, we manage the habitat, in order to support CPW's mission, who is managing the wildlife. And so we have a relationship that we have to, maintain with CPW to support, big game numbers, not just, or any wildlife numbers, but, big game being very important because of deer hunting, deer and elk hunting in the area. But also, it's not just hunting, it's wildlife viewings, for instance. And then there's other, indicator species that we want to manage for, which is basically showing us that, maintaining a healthy forest.
I think part of this question is actually in previous goal 2, strategy 2.2, and you use the best available science and information to gauge impacts of recreation on natural and heritage resources. Trying to figure out how it kind of fits into here. I think there can be additional language in here.
It can be in both places.
It can be both places,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm thinking kind of in a sequential strategies here. I think the first step, this is almost like a standalone goal because we're already doing this, just being here with this group. But I think the first step is just education by the public land managers to stakeholders about maybe what the parameters are, the processes that they have to deal with, and some of the concerns that they have.
So I guess based on that, Paul, how does this continue when this is done? Or what continues out of this
Sure.
when this is completed as well? Because this is really strong collaboration. How does that, organized collaboration?
Yeah, like after this goal setting strategy, because hopefully this coalition will exist for a long time.
Yeah. Multiple use brings multiple concerns. And, again, this mapping, which we really haven't jumped into, which I think we still need to do, so we have an idea of where this mapping that CPW is going to provide for us is going to drive us. And I know that we're going to be missing things like some of the permittees, time, on certain areas that have a lot of recreation. Not just going to be mapping for wildlife habitat, it's going to be mapping for instance, grazing. So, I think the collaboration needs to make sure we continue to pull in not only that strictly wildlife habitat or those wildlife issues, but also the real-time use of the forest by different folks, including the ranching community that spends time in there.
That's a great.
It'd be nice to develop some type of strategy to determine how the input from this group is going to be put into the planning process or project planning process. There's already a planning process, the NEPA process.
Yeah.
How does what this group comes up with kind of fit into that NEPA process? Yeah, at what point? Is it just at the public scoping period? Or is it for then?
I might say a little bit to that. I don't know if everyone can hear me.
Yeah, we hear you.
So I think one of the primary motivating factors for the Pagosa RPI group to form was the result of the Jackson Mountain decision. And that was a decision that was made through the NEPA process essentially denying trails constructed in an area that was um, basically a sensitive area for wildlife. And that was kind of one of the first times we've seen that happen. And of course, those of us that were on the wildlife conservation sort of side of that, we're happy for that. But I think that one of the bigger purposes for these collaborations is to try to have thoughtful collaboration earlier on in order to avoid these issues where a lot of resources are spent on a planning process that ends up getting denied. And so I think that's kind of like where I see this conversation fitting into that. Even though NEPA is sort of taking care of the regulatory environment portion of these conversations, approaching it with a more holistic view from the beginning, I think will save everyone a lot of grief. And aside from that, just as general, to goal 3, I think that, I don't know who it was earlier mentioned wildlife viewing. The SCORP document last year definitely outlined, I think, some important priorities from the perspective of those surveyed in the state of Colorado for what they desire most when it comes to outdoor recreation, and wildlife viewing was actually really high up. I believe, and I could be wrong, that it was higher than even mountain biking, just because of probably the demographic and the accessibility for mountain biking from a financial standpoint. So I think it fits in. I think the wildlife conversation still very much fits into the multiple use spectrum, because we also have a lot of people that hike certain trails for accessing fishing too. There's hunting, which a lot of that's off trail, but the fishing, we have like the Bear Creek area and parts of the Mancos River and various other locations where that comes in. So I think that, yeah, it's probably a good idea. I just wanted to second that. I thought it was a good idea to keep wildlife conversations in goal 3 if possible.
This first bullet that I've got here about education by public land managers to stakeholders about the parameters and concerns around multiple use, that is like generalized, right? Like, this is what multiple use is. Here's why we have to do it. It's not like we're just doing this case by case. This is like core to the land of multiple use. Like, it was an old slogan, right?
It really aims at getting people to the table early, and NEPA is the process, is the planning. I think most of you know NEPA is the planning process we go through to analyze the impacts of the project on all sorts of resources, whether it's wildlife, grazing, social conflicts, things like that. But I can guarantee you, members of the public really don't really want to get involved in that, because it's not a very interesting project. It's cumbersome, but you have to do it because the law says you have to. So it is trying to, I think we need to make it easier for people to be involved or gain access to these projects during our planning process, but not having to devote, countless hours of reviewing, something, that is not within their professional world or their mindset. So, or in their skill set, I should say. So we do that via scoping, early scoping processes, where we basically just have people come to tables and look at the project and ask questions, and we gather a lot of input during that process as well. And it's a little easier on the public to attend those meetings and understand a project by just talking to the different specialists and getting an idea of the project itself. So getting people to the table early is a challenge, but I think it's something that is part of the education and public land management to support.
Yeah, a lot of times by the time you're in the 18th agencies get to the NEPA process, there's already a project in mind.
Yeah,
And a lot of times they put so much energy into it, they're kind of tied to it emotionally, fiscally. Be nice, this group to get to the point where ideas can be generated, and communicated to land managers. So they're not in the NEPA process at that point.
So is this, would it require like a new, like in county planning, this would be like the sketch plan? Right, before you've invested a lot into it, county plan or city planning, they have a sketch plan where it does cost some effort to get in there. You haven't had to survey everything yet, you haven't really spent the big bucks yet, just to get a feel for it. It's risky to take something to sketch plan, because they might say, no, wreck your dream, but would it require some kind of like new look like that, or would it just,
it's just
scoping would work?
scoping would work, and groups bring projects to us, timber industry brings timber projects to us, or their needs to us at least, and we define those areas that we know need logging activity, for instance. Trail groups bring projects to us, the expansion that we did up at the boggy system was something that was driven by the local bike clubs. We've done the same with other clubs like Rico Trails and the Memphis Trails Group. So, but that's a pretty small group of people, bringing projects to us.
That goes back to what you were saying, Paul, is, how, and uniquely as well, as how does this exist beyond this strategy planning that we're doing right now? Because can there be a sort of collaborative pre-process before projects are brought to land managers that are going through sort of the principles that we're lining out in this strategy?
Yeah. But no, there's turf already. I mean,
Yeah.
I can guarantee you our different trail groups don't want this coalition, even though they're playing a role, like Jake is helping out, for instance. They have ownership in their projects, and
You lost.
they want to be involved in some of the early planning as well, so. So if this group starts to develop projects at some point, this coalition starts to develop projects down the road, we'll want to make sure that we have these other groups at the table. They've already invested quite a bit of work and interest in some of the trail development, for instance.
I guess I don't see this group as developing projects personally. I mean, I see it as, I think that you said it, that education piece is an important point where this group can play a vital role. As a layperson who's commented on NEPA processes and as a public official who's been a part of a NEPA project, we don't understand, right? And it's hard to find your entry point. And I think as a layperson, so I think that's a place where this group could have some efficacy, is to be able to make that more transparent, make it more visible. So that's
Biggest strategy would be to develop some type of process between this group or stakeholders to kind of help as, being that medium between stakeholder groups and the
Yeah.
government agency.
just to help get more information out.
Yeah.
And I think it would also be, because we have such established user groups, whether it be by organization or club, it seems like it would, really behoove them to maybe forge a focus group and or committee that can work with this group in particularly the areas of like stewardship, sustainability, those things that a lot of groups are already doing, so that they can have a vested interest in this overall plan and have some sort of goal. I think that would be something that would be beneficial to both, because, we do have a lot of volunteers amongst different user groups that we don't want to lose their involvement. We want to lose their energy. And because they come from different user groups, they also I think it's very valuable that they're having open conversations amongst each other to understand each other from a user perspective. Because we all are different user groups, and if we don't collaborate together on that level, that comes back to then ultimately bite this group, because we're trying to create a sustainable thing for public communities at the recreation level. That makes sense.
How is this strategy here? Right, it's the groups that,
That's sort of the fundamental role, I think, of this
Yeah.
group.
so it could be a committee as a general strategy. We need to find a way to facilitate between stakeholder groups that object, like the Jackson Mountain example is a really good one, because there were stakeholder groups that objected, and I guess that was emotional and that sort of thing. So, a little bit earlier on, if there had been facilitation between the trail groups and wildlife interests, maybe they would have understood that this wasn't gonna happen because, you know, of the value of the habitat or whatever. I don't know how. Okay, so that's maybe the strategies that I'm kind of like writing a lot of stuff down here, but, the strategies I have here, first bullets, are the one about educating people about the parameters of multiple use. So that's more general education about multiple use, and that public land agencies go to work and deal with this every day. This one about defining how it fits, I think we're answering. So this becomes the second strategy about, or this one right here about facilitating between stakeholders. And it kind of like supersedes all these other ones.
So when you say those proposing projects, are those the land managers?
I don't know. I guess it could be, I was thinking it would be, I mean, in some ways, trails groups,
Before land.
Yeah.
trails groups propose those
Yeah.
things.
Right, obviously, we haven't done that. But.
But it could be,
No, we want more, we want more input. We want more input. So it doesn't, it's not just federal land managers, and to be honest, a lot of the success we've had with our new trails have come from public documents.
so should I be more definitive about those? The public,
To define how record conference are, define, somehow capture the fact that it's just not coming from the feds, and it's coming from local states.
Just prior to that federal management process.
Cause it, you know, in a lot of ways.
Local groups proposing.
And I think maybe capturing,
Organizations.
local businesses and organization, businesses, because it could be a permit, you know, like logging.
Yeah.
or just local proposals. I think it's also important that not all projects would require a NEPA process, and there could be, I think it's good to just keep it like NEPA or, you know, otherwise, because I think regardless of whether a NEPA review gets triggered, collaboration could benefit the local community for best outcomes.
Yeah, anytime there's some type of nexus where the government's involved, or spending money or doing something on land, they'll have to do some type of NEPA, but I mean, federal land is the only public land that the group is talking.
I mean, Phil's road
Like
was
county-
example of that, right?
land,
Like that was state
state
trust.
land,
Trust,
yeah.
and
You can put down like a compliance review, will require a compliance review where applicable.
Okay, and then we have a data gap with the wildlife piece of this, and the mapping is super important with this, so we're gonna like repeat or adapt the mapping strategy and have it here, because that helps spot this stuff, right? That helps you figure out who you need to get involved before the proposal gets too far along.
That could be an action item under the first bullet, under education.
Oh, yes, yeah. Hey, didn't any of us.
When you put in the notes that C score for state wildlife direction or state direction and you put RE wildlife, I think it's important to note, and Alex, thank you for that. It's wildlife viewing. And, you know, and really protection of wildlife habitat leads to that. Okay, so it's one doesn't happen without the other, but I do think it's important to reiterate that throughout this one.
Jamie kind of brought up a point, in regards to, it kind of reads that,
where it says the committees, including grazing, for example, kind of flows in to make it sound like it's with the wildlife. I mean, it does at times go hand in hand, but with the livestock, but maybe if we could put livestock in there, because I'm glad it says permittees, because some people don't realize we have to buy those permits.
Yeah. And
We
permittee
pay
could,
for those.
permittee could also be enough your guide as a permit document. So,
That was a great point. I think so far this meeting to add grazing permittees to the mapping. Yeah,
And since that's a multiple use, it could be used as an example for the first bullet. But i.e. grazing, timber, there's so
Jamie,
many
you
things you could.
wanna
put
say
in
something?
with-
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm not there in person. I've got some other stuff going on this afternoon, but whether it's in this goal or another one, I don't know if it fits best here, but I wonder if we just want to say something about managing towards the best available science. So I think the wildlife habitat maps are really important, and I think that's a good tool, but I think that one thing that CPW and the conservation groups can also bring to the table is there's a lot of science that indicates how different recreation activities impact different wildlife species. And so I think managing towards that best available science in terms of how, you know, we have there's a long list of research that's been done related to recreational impacts on wildlife species. And so we kind of know what to expect based on different recreational activities or recreation types or land use types, not even just recreation, but land use types. And so somewhere maybe just something about managing to the best available science, and because I think it goes beyond just the wildlife habitat mapping.
one of the things that I noticed in all of our topics is we don't necessarily call out conservation or wildlife preservation anywhere in our topics, so I think it's okay for it to be reiterated over and over again as we go through each topic. Like, where does that actually, because it is a huge part of the plan, right? So how that fits in under these different types of goals and different topics, I think is fine to have it be slightly redundant.
I agree. In fact, it's good if you have the same strategy for multiple goals, like that tells you that's when they start with. It's like, that gives you clear path toward prioritization. And the best, we already wrote that one about the best, I'm not gonna make you wait while I go find it, but we have the other one that we wrote about that. We can just put that same strategy or adapt it so that we can use it in multiple places. Okay, so this, I think, basically, I'm gonna keep these notes in here. This is a little sloppy because I go back and I redo it, and then I send you guys back the more drafted, well thought out strategies once we have the meeting. But I do it pretty quick too. I go back and do this before I forget everything. But from the non-gray part is what I'm thinking our strategies are, and one of them is an action step, I think, for part of it. But
I want to really quickly acknowledge what Alex put in the chat earlier about having the roundtable review, or do sort of like a roundtable, review of a PDF document prior to a public review, I would say. And
of this plan?
yeah,
Oh, yeah,
exactly.
okay, sure.
Yeah, so I guess my question would be, do you think that's better off doing it in increments or as a final PDF document?
Final.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's what I kind of think too. It's gonna be a little bit of a logjam at the end, but not as bad as if we were, we're going through and we're kind of iteratively doing it. And then we'll just, when we do the final draft, we put a lot of thought into making sure there's no repetition and that we've got everything, those strategies, like the one about the best science is like written the same way. It's the same strategy. You see it 3 or 4 times. So that, it's efficient that way. Okay, should we move on? Should we try to move into equitable access? See how we do there? I have a little bit of data to share with you on that. I dug up some stuff. It's kind of interesting. I'm not gonna drone on about it. But you know me, I like to give at least one speech every time. So here it goes. Here's my speech. Ready? So with equitable access, there's a lot of sort of demographic concerns. And we dug in and checked it out. And, they say that population is aging. It's true. If you look at these population graphs here, you can see it's top heavy population. That's not going to change. That's going to be more and more the case. I've got friends, I'm in one of these bars, I have friends in the bar above me, and they're getting after it. They're not giving up. They're getting surgeries and they're keeping going. So it's like never gonna stop. But the median age increased in Montezuma County from 4% in 12 years, which is actually not that extreme, but so Montezuma County is more family-like than a lot of counties in this state. Dolores County, we gotta take all census data with a grain of salt, because I'm sure about 23 people answered the census out there. It's not great statistics, but it's basically enough to tell you it's about the same in Dolores County. And the census has statistics on disabilities. And you've got 17% of the regional population, including Montezuma County and Dolores County, that reports some kind of disability. And about half of those have mobility issues that result from that. So you have like 8%, like almost 1 out of 10 people in the region that have a mobility issue resulting from a disability. That's a good amount. It's 1 out of 10. It's a good amount.
Disability, including just age-related?
It's not real specific, but it does specify ambulatory difficulty. It doesn't like grade it. It just tells you like this population is here, and the take home is it's a significant chunk of folks. It's like enough of the population to pay attention to. So SCORP drilled into this. There's new questions on the SCORP survey that I never noticed before, I guess, but it's kind of the direction the state has taken about barriers and that sort of thing. And so 37, so the survey is Western Slope. I think there's a couple other study areas. There's like the city and then the Eastern Plains maybe, but Western Slope is one area where they aggregate their survey results. So it's all up and down the Western Slope. But anyways, over a third of the people on the Western Slope say that health and mobility is a barrier to outdoor recreation. You think 1 out of 10, like that's a real amount of people. You look around the grocery store, 1 out of 3 have some kind of mobility issue with regard to outdoor rec. So then it's the other piece of this on the right side of this is whether those folks feel like lack of accessible options to them is part of the barrier. So that has to do with like how close, is it hard for them to get to, is the problem that they've got mobility issues and they can't get to the opportunity, the outdoor rec opportunity. So that's more like 1 out of 5, which is still significant. It's still a significant chunk of the population. that is saying, you know, on the western slope overall, 1 out of 5 people are saying, well, I'd like, you know, I can't get to the outdoor recreation opportunities because of my mobility issues and also because of where they are. It's a combination of my mobility problems and where this stuff is. That's the combining factors.
So are you saying can't get there as in transportation wise, or can't get to the spot where the recreation opportunity begins? Does that make sense?
Lack of accessible options to travel to outdoor recreation sites for those with physical disabilities as a barrier to participation in outdoor recreation. That is the actual wording right out of the scope. So it's one of these parts of the survey where it's getting more and more narrow. They're cross-tabbing off of people that say they have physical disabilities as a barrier. And they're saying that of those, 18% are lacking options, accessible options to travel to outdoors. So it is, I think it could be the ability to get there, it could be how far away it is.
So it's
It could be a combination of.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's how I read it.
What did you think? What was that?
Well, that's a transportation issue.
Yeah, it sounds like.
Whereas that's not, there's a access point to view the river.
Right.
That it's actually there.
But they can't actually get to the river
I
to
can't
view
get
the
to
river.
Right.
Yes.
Or it could be too
Because
far away.
LoCo doesn't have the right transportation to get me to where I need to go. If I don't
Right, and
drive
so would you
myself.
consider that a physical disability or like a
Yes.
socioeconomic?
I think there's two in this data, both.
Yeah.
So the graph data here indicates, when I look at this, I see that most report it's, you know, very, very seldom an issue. And as you go down, you're getting to the people I think are the folks that are more likely their disabilities are greater. And these are the types of people that they may be able to get to a trailhead or whatever. And maybe they're the folks that are involved with like an adaptive sport organization. You know, like they can get there, whereas a lot of people are reporting it's very rarely an issue, but there is a significant percentage that is on the other side of that scale. And those are the folks that, once they get to the venue, it's the specialization of an organization that can meet their needs, like adaptive skiing, adaptive biking, things like that. That's the way I'm kind of reading that graph.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I wanted to say, in some instances, it may be the facilities are not present at the location. So for people like myself with a physical disability, have some bathroom issues and there's no porta potties, there's no bathroom out at the location. I know that may not fall into this bit of data, but sometimes what prevents me from going is the fact that there are no facilities there. And over the course of an 8-hour day, I may need use of a restroom facility. So I don't know if that plays into it or not, but I wanted to mention that.
That's how I was reading it. I was reading it as like it could be a transportation issue, but it also could be that the right facilities are not within reach of their, you know, their day-to-day thing.
Although this is scope survey, I do recall, I can't remember if it was the public meeting you had, no, I think it was our first public meeting, accessibility, maybe it was both, anyway, accessibility issues came up, just simply transportation issues. So I think it's facilities can not only tie into what Dave's talking about, but I think some of the transportation issues that he brought up.
And along those lines, there's, you know, it's fairly like less than it used to be, but pretty stout poverty rate in our region here. It's less than it used to be. It's less than 10%. That's an improvement. Well, it is census, so you know, a lot of people don't answer this. You know, a lot of people don't answer it, but
I just want to
yeah.
point out, the community, the Census American, as you said before, that data is often not very representative because it takes, so actually the state demographer's office has that data for Montezuma County as much closer to 10%. I think in Cortez alone, data for 2024 was close to 16% poverty. So just take those numbers with a grain of salt. The community survey is not very accurate for our area.
Yeah, I think you don't want to dismiss it because the census, because in a lot of situations, it's all we've got. But you do have to like step back from it and read it like it's not debating between 7.8% and 10%. It's like significant. Like if the ACS is picking it up and it's like in that range, you know, there's a good chunk of the population that is experiencing this. And I think, you know, there's a way to sort of, so that we can translate it. We can put that into numbers, like it's basically thousands of individuals. Like if I take this data and run a little bit of math on it, it's over 3,600 people in the region that are living in under the poverty line, and 621 families or households that are under that poverty level. So it's like, it's a lot. It's a significant part of the community. And we, you know, again, according to the census, no, this isn't actually the census. This is from partly from the census and partly from HUD, the Indian Housing Block Grant Formula estimation, which is also based on the census actually at the end, but it's more refined. So anyways, roughly 4,000 people in Montezuma County have some Native American, and the tribal enrollment in Ute Mountain Ute is, according to their website, I think, as well as the HUD formula, is 2,070. And according to that HUD data, there are 579 households in the Housing Authority service area, which I don't know exactly what that is, but it is usually larger than the reservation itself. That are 80% or less of area median income, which is maybe not poverty, but it's pretty close. It's definitely struggling. So there's just a lot of people struggling to make a living in this region. That's the take home. There's a lot of people struggling to make a living, and a lot of because of that, underrepresented, what SCORP calls underrepresented population. So I'm gonna go with that because I always mess up my terminology with that kind of stuff. But so transportation, now we're like a direct hit on transportation. 25% of Western Slope respondents cited transportation as a barrier. 44% of Western Slope respondents registered cost as a barrier, which is more in line with a lot of there's a whole industry around getting youth outdoors. It's like a real thing in Montezuma County. There's like, it's a real industry. It's one of the most identifiable outdoor, like subsectors of outdoor recreation that I can find. It's like youth in the outdoors. But it's like a lot of what those organizations are doing is they're dealing with cost barriers, and like trust. Because they're teenagers, right? So they don't trust anybody.
You know, this is interesting. These statistics are interesting because as federal agencies continue to battle with funding, there's opportunities for fee sites to be developed. You know, Park Service has an entrance fee, for instance. Some of the bigger forests have fee areas where you have to pay a fee to be in there to use it. And that would not be very popular here, of course, and not only because of the optics of it, but also simply the fact that we discussed the property rates here. That's another added expense to someone trying to enjoy public lands. So something for this group to keep in mind if local agencies go that way.
Yeah, I think that's an area, that's a strategy that this group could have within this goal, is to advocate and be an advocate for that section of our population, to not put up more barriers. So it's not just about, yeah, what, not just getting rid of barriers, but not creating more barriers. And how do you do that? I think that's a piece that is the, yeah, strategy that here focus.
Yeah. 2.1 right there.
Yeah.
I almost want to like use some really bad grammar and see to not to,
Don't
not to
play.
make it
That's
more
right.
expensive.
Yeah,
No pay to play.
Add more expense. We gotta frame that where we have control, in fees or do we just leave it general like that?
E.g. fee areas. So we don't lose. Lose vision or lose, focus it back to the potential project or that possible problem.
Okay. We might.
It wouldn't
And
necessarily
also
be
to
just
support,
increasing the.
like I keep thinking about mixed gear lending library, right? Like
Yeah,
that's another piece,
SCYC.
the gear piece of recreation is
Absolutely.
out of range for this same demographic. So how do we enhance or support that?
Say support programs that reduce costs or barriers, recreation.
And is there a senior component to what like the year lending library is for youth and families? Is there an not opposite, but a complementary one for seniors, a complementary one for people who do have mobility challenges, a complementary one, like, we're very focused on youth in our community, but are there some other user groups that we're missing being focused on that?
I think it's important to call out both youth and seniors in this. Even though you're right, we are supportive of youth, it should be spelled out in the strategy.
My grammar's just getting worse and worse as you're going here, but you get what I mean, right? I do rewrite this, it's hard to do this on the fly. Okay, so do not ask fees, I've got gear here.
I think
It's
that
like gear, which is important, I think that's part of the cost, I think that's one of the things that costs.
I mean, just personally, my daughter and I wanted to try kayaking and I'm like, well, I don't wanna go buy a kayak to see if this works. And so I just put out on Facebook, that we have a kayak we can borrow and stuff. And, I think if people don't have access to networks of people as well, they're just not gonna step into it.
What was, you were about saying something about fees.
Oh, as far as like, for the majority of being on the forest service and such. there
Hold on
are
a second,
no
1 second, you
fees.
guys. I'm sorry, I rebooted this conversation about the.
Oh,
fees.
no, I was just saying that the increasing fees, we don't really have fees, we have that opportunity to go up to buggy draw and bike, and it doesn't cost.
True.
And, so I mean, you use the word increasing, I just was, as we. see
Increasing or adding.
Adding, yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
A good example of that, for instance, is the fee reservoir. If you're running a motorboat out there, you register your boat, and that helps fund our mussel inspection program down there. In some ways, that makes sense to add fees there because it's a high use area, you've got thousands of people. But now we're double taxing those folks, and so then we all pay if that. So, or how, the next step would be how do we pay for maintaining the new bathrooms at Bobby Draw? That would be a fee. Again, that fee area is, as Chad said, is another barrier to access.
There's a lot of examples throughout the West where areas didn't charge fees for like dispersed camping, but it became so popular that in order for the land managers to maintain that, they had to start charging fees. So I don't know if this group is in a position where they can work with land managers, come up with ideas on, before they get to that point where they have to charge fees, to come up with creative ways to cost down.
Recreation does cost money.
Yeah. I recently learned, at Montezuma Leadership at the nonprofit, day a couple of weeks ago, we have over 300 nonprofit organizations in our valley. And a lot of them are, span that, youth to senior age range and also span quite a bit of outdoor recreation. So I think again, in the strategy here, again, it's identifying groups that are meeting the needs of those populations. We also have several businesses, Alpaca Raft, Osprey. Last month I delivered, a whole van load of Osprey equipment down to Gallup, New Mexico. And so as far as gear goes, we have those opportunities to figure out, well, where can Osprey play a role here? Where can Alpaca Raft play a role alongside with all these nonprofits to meet this, underrepresented population access?
There's, I've got my hand raised, I'm gonna lower it. We can also, this would be a bigger thing, but advocate for we have one of the lowest lodging tax rates in the entire state. Could an increase in lodgers tax, which really goes towards people visiting, could portion of that money go for trail maintenance or accessibility, increasing our accessibility to our outdoors so that we're putting that fee not on our locals, but on people visiting this area. There's other really unique ideas outside in the state that I don't know anything about, but tax credits for businesses that go directly back into the forest, friends groups. So just some different ways to think about how do we fund these kind of improvements.
Are those all taxes? Can I just say, explore?
I need, one of you might know her. There's someone that works, I forget what it is. I'll try to find information on it. I don't think it is a tax that I don't know. Like a credit program. I don't know. I'll find out the person I'm thinking of, that kind of unique way of funding kind of work in the forest.
Let's stick with lodging taxes, just knowing how difficult it is to pass mill levies and other related taxes in this county.
And plus, you're right that, lodging taxes affect visitors, not residents.
Yeah.
I think you should do some real research into that, though. I don't think it'll be as easy to do that as what we're thinking.
No, it's not.
I think statutorily we're stuck spending on housing. Now, there is as I understand it, a way forward with that, but I think it's part of the code. So if you could put it on the ballot, maybe we can get it there.
But that's essentially what Chaffey County did.
There's funny work like they've got in, like City of Steamboat Springs. This is the city. They charge a lodging tax. And it goes toward trail construction. But it's contracted. It's like what you and I were talking about before the meeting, where they have an agreement with USFS to basically fund positions to build trails. And it's seasonal. It's all seasonal. It's the same stuff that you guys have a lot of problems with, but yeah, it's complicated and people fight it.
Well, the Red Rock Pass in Sedona is another example. It's not a lodging tax, but it's a pass.
Well, and I wanted to mention the lodging tax, James, and you're totally right. It would have to go to a vote. It's a huge process, but it is something that, is not imminent, but in the city, we talk about it, comes up as an option. And if that's something that this group feels strongly about, having those champions in the community to say, when and if the city does go to increase our lodging tax, or the county goes to increase our lodging tax, to have champions to say, we're going to use it for this, and this is the reason why. Again, it's all just a high in the sky conversation, but it is something that I think a lot of our leaders in the city of Cortez anyways are starting to think about, so.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm not saying we shouldn't look into it. I'm just saying we should explore it pretty thoroughly.
Yeah, completely. It's a huge.
Yeah.
It's a good thing he's not.
To do. To do this for-
Right, well, that's, I mean, this is kind of it's another goal, but I didn't even really think about the overlap between these two. Because I think the way to talk about the fees is, it's not like, for what I'm getting from you all, is that federal land managers you all don't want to charge fees, because then you become everybody's worst enemy. And you get a lot of flack, especially around here. Like, it's not like you want everybody's like, yeah, let's get in there and charge some fees. It's a lot more thoughtful and kind of last resort. It almost sounds like in some ways, but
Also seems labor intensive to me,
Well,
like to be a boggy draw, like, how are you charging? How is that happening too? Like, to me, it seems like a lot of work.
Yeah, another idea, so when you have an ATV, you register it, and that goes into a number of things, including a pot of money for grants that, Forest Service chases to work on motorized trails. It's a very successful program. It's how we really, fund some of our trail staff, but there has been a discussion about adding it to mountain bikes. I mean, your mountain bike, low end, you're paying a couple grand for a mountain bike, high end. So high end, it's more. Yeah, so you can afford $25 for a passenger mountain bike. And that would be, but we need to ask Larry Don to run that through, because I think that's actually not a bad idea to ask Larry Don to start some, legislation moving forward to register mountain bikes to help support local rec.
okay, that's good. This goal, we just started in on the strategies, and we never really thought about the goal. Again, you all think, so the
No,
goals,
good.
there's two goals. One is increase outdoor recreation visitation by disabled individuals, and one is this one that we've been ripping on. Is it okay? I just wanted to make sure we were.
I have a question, and I don't know if it, like fishing license, where does that money go to?
Colorado Parks and Wildlife.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
so it
it's
doesn't.
Federal tax too, the Dingle Johnson Act.
Oh, yeah.
It's a part of it, like the Tevin Robinson Act, with hunting. Goes,
And hunting,
yeah,
yeah.
that's hunting goes to federal. But there was talk about 27 years ago, called teaming of wildlife, where they wanted to tax, like binoculars, kind of non-hunting and fishing items. That would be kind of like the Tim and Robinson Act that could then go into recreation development, but, it was a national effort that never really went anywhere. Maybe they could do that in the state, yeah.
Viewing wildlife is so popular.
It is, yeah, think about all the binoculars, bird books that people buy.
Is it a fallacy, like with that fishing license comes a little bit of insurance? Like I used to carry wildlife, with Outback insurance when I was hiking the lake, so I carried that. But does the fishing license come, I don't know where I've heard that and I haven't looked into it, but does it come with something like that at all?
No, I think you can buy the star.
The search.
Yeah, it's like 50
Search
cents.
and rescue.
Search and rescue.
I just think about, people getting hurt and that's a huge expense. Community as,
And additional workload for local law enforcement. But now they got something you gotta buy before you can get a fishing license or a hunting tag. I think it's like an outdoor or use permit or something.
Well, there's park, CPW's park
Or
tax.
CPW, yeah, well.
The habitat.
The
You
habitat stand?
Habitat.
Yeah,
gotta buy that for
yeah, before you can even buy a license and everything else, you have to have that.
Yeah, I was just thinking of something like that, that would
Jamie-
cover kind of a registration for being there. And then you also have like a.
I like that refocus though on statewide taxes. Like this is a state project. They want to support us. It's real tough to pass taxes locally. It's real tough to pass taxes federally. Maybe we could have a better look at it.
As long as they have a plan to get that tax money back to Southwest Colorado, one of the big issues that a lot of rural places are struggling with on that affordable housing tax bill that it wasn't a tax, but the affordable housing legislation that we passed is most of that money is going to the Front Range. A huge majority of the affordable housing is going to the Front Range. And so it's really frustrating at those state taxes to not be seeing it put, back into rural Colorado. So just a thought. Yeah, allocated equitably based on population, based on usage too. I mean, I think not just, the state creates a lot of these grant programs, but then if you don't have capacity in your organizations to apply for those grant programs, you don't get the grant funding. So can we allocate that fairly, either through population or usage rates? Not just who has the capacity to write the grants and get the money.
That is really good input. Because every one of these grants have a fee associated with it, so that's really hard for a small rural community to come up with a fee in order to get you the grant.
Yeah, the match, yeah.
Should we move on to the mobility one, or do we want to?
I guess I just had
Riff on this
a
one.
question. It seems like we're really concentrating on, making it affordable for historically underrepresented populations and, with the idea of, if we build it, they'll come. But I wonder if there's anything else that we can do to support programs that can get, underrepresented populations outside.
Like,
Well, I mean, like Vic or Suppose does a good job at getting kids
Yeah.
outside and.
I think it's doing an inventory of who's doing it right now. And what are they doing and where are the gaps? Because, grants through High Desert Eagle for biking, SWOs, SCYC. Let's get an accurate idea of who's doing what, where's the grant dollars coming in. And then identifying, okay, well, this is missing, there's no water sport component here, there's no, motorized sport component here, or hunting or fishing.
Or maybe just finding out, what does the underrepresented population want to do? I mean, what activities do they do rather than. Go for a hike.
I think that's great. I mean, it's like, but the inventory would be interesting because I bet you the programs themselves would be very interested in that.
Yes.
Like, I don't think my sense of it, because I've been doing these interviews, is that they don't all know what is going on, which is typical. I mean, that's typical. Everybody gets in their thing and they get up and they do their job every day. But I think there's a lack of like big picture grip on this industry, which is very much a Montezuma County industry. Kids in the outdoors. Well, and Dolores County, really. I mean, because like most of those organizations are permitted right in here in Montezuma and Dolores County. They're having problems going into Utah because of state lines, but they're working on that. So it's I think that's an interesting. I wonder if there's more.
Can you capture
Support.
seniors too?
What was that?
Capture seniors too?
Mm-hmm.
I'll see, I stick down Dave Van, coming to the reservoir, filling the body just to get folks out, so.
And there is a senior task force going on right now through the county, through social services, so there might be, it's for aging population in Montezuma County, so there might be some information being gathered. We've been kind of focused on some other stuff, but they might have a beat on some resources available to our aging population.
So it would almost, I feel like there's an end of this, which is where we would tell that seniors organization and Open Sky and then Plotted Youth Services guy that runs trips over here and stuff like that, what do we do with this inventory? I guess that's what I'm trying to get, like, where do we
That's
go?
a guiding question for us, is how do we become a resource to support these things? Not how we do it, right? Like, there's no way this group can actually do these programs, but how do we support it? And maybe that's a grant writing committee, maybe that's those can then be the strategies. But this group becomes a resource to elevate and to facilitate these things and support these things, not do them.
Exactly. Yeah.
So he's got a job and she's got a job. I don't have a job. But the point is, right, is that as a group, how do we support, how do we become a resource? That's my
And
thing.
you mentioned the absence of knowing what's out there, right? You know, a lot of people don't know what's out there, and a lot of these efforts are working in silos, and it may be going on and they just don't know about it. So the outreach, the promotion, creating a resource of sorts that allows people to learn what is available, I think would be more of our role than saying, oh, we have to put a program for this. And then we're, doing something that maybe two other organizations are doing or have funding for, things like that.
Here's this, my grammar is just getting bad. Now we got like German philosophy run-on sentences here, but I think what I'm putting in there is that we need, part of this is, I think the needs analysis and like, that's a way that to do a needs, kind of a needs analysis and a gap assessment, because that's something to share with them. And then we need to help them with that. Like the first thing that needs to happen is this group, somebody needs to get those entities together so that they know what's going on. And a lot would come of that, I think. Good. It's very good. So
We get these people together, more would do that, like, that's part of, work that we're doing is, trying to help bring people together in open conversation that maybe hasn't happened, a lot of conversation for youth is happening through Team Up, but, are there still some missing pieces in that, so.
what's Team Up again? I saw that.
That's the cradle to career, with that it's looking at food insecurity, youth access,
United
safe
Way.
spaces for youth,
Okay.
it's through United Way, so.
Okay,
Kind of everything that youth deal with, trying to get everybody around the table for it, so. And that's helped.
should we take a crack at this other part of this? Do you like the goal? Pretty direct, like it's almost, I don't know. But I guess like I was trying to think of like, what's the outcome? What are you trying to get to with this part of it? Probably, this is what I came up with, but I don't know if there's a better way to increase outdoor recreation visitation by disabled individuals.
Individuals with disabilities.
Individuals with
Yeah,
disabilities.
they're not labeled by their disability.
Individuals with disabilities. See, I was trying to save words, but we're gonna.
I would have the same tax stuff here too. Lodging tax, if and when that happens.
And I think identifying what the desires are, not try to put what we think, but somehow.
Dave and
I would also,
Dave and I have been
I'll-
talking.
go ahead.
Dave and I have been talking with Telluride Adaptive Sports about, some events down here, for instance, they have a class in the, buggy beat down for adaptive users. So, there's some things on the table. Dave, I don't want to speak on your behalf, but I think you were part of that discussion with Tim.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to mention just a couple of things, tying into the last bit of the last slide. We are running into year 3. We have a partnership with a group called Tribal Adaptive down mostly in northern New Mexico, indigenous folks with spinal cord injuries. And we've got, when we started, we got a $40,000 grant. Forgive me, I don't know the source, but I can get it, to bring groups of athletes with spinal cord injuries from the reservation areas up to this area, not just Telluride, but also some summertime biking at Boggy and or we've been out to Moab. We just 3 or 4 months ago secured another $110,000 grant through the Craig T. Nielsen Foundation, which funds adaptive sports and recreation programs, to continue with Tribal Adaptive and Telluride Adaptive, to do both multiple programs during the winter, which is basically sit ski camps in Telluride, as well as bike camps, hand cycling, mostly both locally here in the Western Slope and also out in Moab. So the groups are out there and they want to give money away. So there are opportunities there, and I could probably give a little bit of a deeper dive along, like you said, Tom, with Tim, who does most of that research into those organizations. Also, sorry to backtrack a little bit, but I didn't know how many of you know that anybody in United States with a permanent disability is granted free lifetime access to all national parks and national monuments. And there's a card given, which you can display. It's basically like a placard that you hang in your car as you get to the lineup for a national park or monument. That shows that you have a permanent disability, and all access fees are waived for a lifetime. So most of the people I know who enjoy the outdoors and wilderness that are living with disabilities have that pass.
I think a big piece of this one is the need for accessible transportation. It's highly specialized, and there's a lot of nonprofits that have those capabilities, and they might be acting in silos and not really thinking about how to maybe expand and provide those accessible resources just to get people out there, and then support. So you support those organizations, and then you support the ones like adaptive sports and to really come in with the actual specialized equipment. So it's kind of a two-part. How do we support that?
Yeah, we're just in the. We just raised at Telluride Adaptive through a number of campaigns. Excuse me, close to about $75,000 for a new, like a Sprinter van with a side access lift. We've had one for the last 10 years, kind of a Mercedes Sprinter van that we bought back in 2014, that has a rear access wheelchair lift. But after 10 years, that vehicle is kind of running out of steam, if you will. And so I would imagine that the 75 grand that we've raised so far is for the vehicle itself, and then the modifications to add a wheelchair lift on the side of the van is probably going to be another 50. But we continue to raise funds for that so that we can do just this, get our folks out into the wilderness areas with wheelchairs and a trailer, probably pulling, a bunch of hand cycles and similar mobility devices.
So what you're saying, Jason, is that there's people set up for transportation now, but they're going to the grocery store or whatever, and they're not.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I'll use an example when I volunteered at Adaptive. And then I also worked for their community connections, right? There was this programming challenge that we were having at CCI, getting people out just to access what, adaptive sports had in the community. So we were constantly using our vehicles that were adaptive, right, to get people to these spots. And there just never seemed to be enough transportation. And I know they did that with seniors. And I know, through some funding, they were working with veterans with disabilities in different ways. And it was just kind of it felt like it was kind of an all hands on deck kind of proposition to get that transportation piece figured out. Outside of like a normal bus route, which we don't have over here.
So the input, public input on this was, one of the interesting ones I thought was, I mean, there's really kind of two types of input that were repeated, but one of them had to do with better info about the ADA facilities, the actual like ramps and fishing docks and that sort of stuff. So that people know it's there. And then the other one was just build more of it. We need more of it. So I don't know if we want to.
That needs to be captured, because even what you just said earlier, David, about, you know, if you've got to consider, is it an 8-hour day or 8-hour drive away? And what type of facilities are available for you, whether it's restrooms or, like you said, ramps or things like that?
Yeah, my first trip to Boggy Draw brought on, you know, an immediate panic attack when I saw, this was probably 6 or 7, maybe longer years ago. I went out to ride ATVs and we saw just a single able-bodied use only porta potty there. And I realized, you know, again, it's an anxiety kind of thing. I didn't have to go at the moment, but boy, oh boy, the thought of being out there all day without access to any kind of toilet facility. Now I go to Boggy Draw and with a big smile on my face, so thank you. But yeah, those are considerations always for us. Mostly mobility disabilities, but you know, certainly makes life easier for people with visual impairment, et cetera, and people with limited walking ability as well. Now that we have restroom facilities at Boggy.
So the restroom facilities thing is not just an example. It's like a key strategy, standalone strategy.
Well, I think we also, if we're looking at like cross-referencing, if we look at goal 1, at least at 1.5, we have a strategy to develop low effort, easy to find attractions for tourists. Roadside heritage attractions too. I think we ought to think about this in terms of individuals with disabilities too. It's not just the individuals with disabilities that want to get out there. It's attracting more to the outdoors. So it's those low effort, low risk things that get people out and get them engaged. Right?
Maybe an action item would be to support developing some type of an app or something, an app where areas that are accessible, are easily identified.
I bet that would be a great thing to add to code trucks, things like that.
Yeah,
and
I'll
our
say that.
campaign, this is where, you know, this is where you can fish. This is where you can do wildlife. This is where you could, etc.
They just want to add to the bathroom with the mapping, just for examples, is really disgusting. But during hunting season, all the people from out of town come to go hunting, there's no bathrooms, and they don't want to go in the camp. They go in the corrals. Whereas then in the fall, there we've got a mess. So
In the corrals?
In the corrals.
Wow.
I guess because
There
I
is
think-
more cattle education that needs to happen.
Gross. Yeah, and so one of the rangers found it, he found it, and he knew, he's seen the tracks where the guys were camping, and he waited for them, and he's like, now you guys can clean it up.
Good for you.
And he waited for them, and they looked, luckily they were nice enough to do it, but we find that out in the forest, that if there's no bathrooms anywhere close, they're camping up there, well, then we're riding through it, and then here's toilet paper.
Oh, everywhere, yes. Oh, so
Everywhere,
gross.
and you're already on it, and your horse is already running through it, and you're like, oh, yuck. But, I mean, for mapping, I think, for, you know, to get the word out there where there's facilities.
At the very least, an education point, right? Like this is how to
Yeah,
properly dispose of your waste in a wilderness setting. whatever.
yeah, you'd hope they follow it.
How to poop in the woods.
There is a motivation.
I feel like that might be a better item for maybe a different goal. I don't know how well it aligns with this one with increased recreation for those with disabilities, but it is I think education component that's worth having somewhere for people to pick up their toilet paper and not use the bathroom on the surface. For certain things is good. I just wanted to say, the only thing that really comes to mind for me with this, my only personal experience with this is the older friends I have, family, and also folks I know with young children. It seems like a hidden gem that was neglected for a long time would be the Big Owl Trail. And it's a wheelchair accessible trail. It might not fit the needs for all different types of disabilities, but I think it also is kind of one of those trails that I think is a good example for something that could solve a few different goals, to have more opportunities like that. Simply because I know at one point it was somewhat desolate, but now it's becoming more of a crowded space because it's one of the few places where people can walk with their families, either their young children who are really just getting their legs, or folks that have, impairments with walking that can't do rougher trails or trails with horse use or mountain bike use, and it needs to be a slower pace, and they have bathroom facilities and places for people to sit down and rest as needed. But it's also a really short trail, and it is it has an educational component to it because it has places with like plant and wildlife identification plaques and things of that nature. And I feel like it could fill a lot of goals to have more of that, but I think from my perspective that there's a desire for more of that kind of thing. And it's a pretty low impact sort of project simply because it doesn't require a ton amount of space. It's a shorter trail in a loop next to a campground. And so that's the only thing I wanted to bring up was I think more opportunities like the Big Owl Trail, where there's good viewing of wildlife and it just kind of checks a lot of boxes. I think that would be good to try to maximize the level of effort, the cost benefit, I guess, if you will, for reaching a few different goals.
That's super helpful, Alex, sorry. Also, maybe like reserving that for when we go back to multi-use and how we're determining multi-use, if that's a trail that's specifically catered to a certain demographic, that I feel like should be considered. And maybe reserving it for foot traffic or ADA accessible traffic and not allowing multi-use on it.
It's a non-motorized trail.
It is.
Yeah. In fact, we've got some green area, outdoor act money, we're gonna do some paving of it. Hopefully this season. So that'll prove that particular one, but it doesn't mean that Alex is wishing that small opportunity, so.
I was just gonna say, I think he's right, the restroom thing for like hunting, stuff like that, maybe, I was looking back through our previous goals, maybe that's goal 2, strategy 2.1, part of that, explore and implement stewardship education, maybe that's where that actually needs to go rather than with this group here, so maybe. You're the master of the plan, so.
No, I think you're right. I mean, we'll have to, the restroom thing, every interview so far, restrooms have come up, no matter what kind of person it is, from where they're coming from. The most expensive thing you guys can provide, that's what everybody wants.
Well, the bathroom alone up there, not the parking lot, but the bathroom alone was $180. Yeah, and that includes concrete, but not the parking, but I mean, that gives you an idea of the infrastructure costs.
Well, Kayla and I can talk to you about that.
Yeah, I know. But that's another discussion. Hey, Dave Sussman, I wanted to go back to that first bullet, that I think came out of our discussion about, Telluride Adaptive Sports and, Adaptive Sports Association out of Durango. Rather than conducting a needs assessment, I'd like to just capitalize on those existing relationships that we already have out there. So strike the needs assessment and reference our existing relationships with local adaptive sports industries. Yeah, but David, I'd like you to weigh in on that.
Absolutely. I think it'd be a missed opportunity if we don't. We've got the relationships. This is what we do. I would defer to Tim McGow, who's our program director. He's been at Telluride Adaptive for nearly 20 years. He lives and breathes the stuff. I'm just the figurehead board of directors president, but having lived with a disability most of my life, 47 years, I come to it from that perspective where Tim, as the program manager with deep relationships all along the Western Slope, getting people with disabilities out into the wilderness areas is the key. Grabbing a couple of hours of his time, and I don't know by name all of the folks down in Durango, but certainly I've been on campouts and such up in Woods Lake, outside of Ridgeway and other places. We do collaborate quite a bit, and I think looping in the adaptive programs is thumbs up all the way.
How do I finish this sentence?
I would just strike two and just engage local adaptive sports organizations.
Engage, yeah.
Engage with.
Another group to add, there might be other groups, is the DAV, Disabled American Veterans.
Really want to say why we're engaging with it. Somebody's.
To enhance.
To leverage.
What are we doing with?
We're leveraging existing relationships and decades of knowledge in getting people living with disabilities into the wilderness.
And to understand what they want, what they need, besides transportation to get there.
Right.
It's also getting back to the trail constructions. I know, in my industry, in my world, adaptive cycling in the woods is becoming a huge thing, and there's a lot of science behind the trail development that becomes successful to these incredibly technological bikes out there that people are getting on trails. So I think that idea sharing and that knowledge combined with then working with trail organizations to say, hey, we want to make this happen at Bottom Draw, or we'd like to have a trail X of this at, Aqueduct or wherever. So I think that would be a huge opportunity there.
Should we try to dive into the other couple goals? Start feeling satisfied with this? I mean, we're not done with this plan until it's done, so we're gonna go back and, but at some point, we've thought hard about it. I think the first thing that we do with this section here is just look at the goals and make sure we like them. And then if we feel good about it, we can go into strategies in our last 15 minutes. So I just wrote these things, and this is something that I gathered really from looking at the other plans and just thinking about in game with this and the direction that we had going into this from the executive committee this is a strategic plan. We want to be action oriented on, ideally during it, but for sure, once we're, on the way out of it, we're getting busy and we're getting some projects done. So I thought really what we need is a full on outdoor recreation operations, maintenance and capital improvements plan and cost estimates for all of it. I don't know, like, so they did this in the chafing plan. I don't know how they did it or where they came up with the numbers. But they did, they have stats in the plan, you know, that we need $20 million of improvements and they don't exactly tell you how it all tallies up to $20 million. So it's a little bit of shock value, I think, but there's some level of we need this and this, and we need to close, you know, consolidate campgrounds in this area. We're gonna, you know, increase volunteer hours by this, and so their operations and maintenance and their capital component of this looks like a capital plan. And I thought, geez, that would be, if we're really gonna develop a funding strategy, right? So we had, in this group, kind of gone ahead and started talking about the funding strategy. And in my mind, I'm like, well, you're never gonna get any funding unless you're perfectly clear about what the heck it is you're trying to do. So there's overlap here, right? There's all these things that this capital improvements plan would start to more thoroughly list and evaluate the costs, you know, the linear miles of the next Big Al trail kind of thing. How much is a 6-foot crush refine trail cost in lumpy terrain? And we'd actually estimate some of the costs of this and get a look at what we're, you know, so we know what we're looking at, and so that we know $1 million of lodging tax or binocular taxes a year is gonna get us this far, and then we can prioritize. Wouldn't it be nice? But that was the thinking behind it, and I don't know how in the heck this kind of thing would fit into multiple agency public lands, that sort of thing. So I thought first we should just like see whether these top goals are on the same planet.
That's a hard one, I think. I don't think it's for this group. And certainly for this group to recognize that there's operational costs, but our real property program has deferred maintenance equations that are built into it. So we have this deferred maintenance, and that's one of the tools that help fund the Great American Outdoor Act, is this recognition of deferred maintenance being a problem for all agencies. But I don't know how Park Service establishes what it costs to maintain, you know, balcony house versus what Forest Service, you know, I know what it costs to maintain a trail per mile or a bathroom, you know. But again, I don't know if it's for us to tackle. It's for the agencies to tackle. It's for the public to understand that there are costs to infrastructure, costs to what they enjoy out there.
Is there a way for us to capture that more like philosophically as a principle that we wanna? I don't know if it's create a wish list, as we're talking about where we're doing gap analyses, and under these different topics, then we know what we want to improve upon. But not necessarily come up with a budget and a number of, this is what we.
But I think we as a group need to decide which of these goals, you know, kind of falls into the overall goal and mission of the coalition. Like Chad said, you know, are we gonna develop and implement a workforce development service? That's kind of a lofty goal. We can like propose it. Maybe it's like maybe support an organization that we have, but a lot of these things might be outside the scope of what we can do. I mean, for the Chafee plan, I mean, were they implementing a lot of those big projects and budgets that they were?
Certainly workforce, but they had deep pockets.
And they've been established for a really long time, you know, they grew out of a rec council that already existed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, they basically have a capital improvements plan. It's not rigorous. and it's not super accurate. I mean, it's estimated, I'll put it that way. It's general and it's estimated. And then they have, I haven't been there, right? I'm not in these meetings, so I'm like going by what I read, just as a, that's my little lawyer disclaimer. But going by based on what I've read. From what I can tell, they have this overall capital improvements plan. It's tied into their strategies, right? To their make it cool, make it, they've got these like core directional strategies. Their capital improvements plan is framed under those things, and they do have these rough cost estimates. And I have no idea where they came from. I mean, but they have funded, the reason that they did this, I think, even though, the estimation might be a little bit sketchy, is because what they really are doing is they're prioritizing projects off the master list, taking them into a more detailed planning process and trying to do the project. So they've got like prioritization criteria tool that they use to prioritize projects. I mean, most of it's opportunistic, like like the next Big Al Trail, that's gonna be because like something comes together and the next Big Al Trail is the outcome. But I think they wanna have the Big Al Trail on some plan so that they're ready to just move on it. And I think what Michelle is saying is kind of what I was wondering, is you were talking like, oh God, we were talking about just trying to get the federal budget for recreation. It's multi-layered. There's not an easy answer to it. You can't just look it up like you can with Montgomery County's budget. It's not that simple. So maybe the cost estimate part of it is the issue.
Could it be doing, again, a gap analysis or understanding where there are budget constraints and where we can support those, and so building a strategy around fundraising to support where we see there's a lack. Federal funding is a huge one, or building infrastructure. When we're talking about creating ADA accessible sites or even transportation, whether that's parking lots or actual vehicles to get people from point A to point B. Does that make sense to
Yeah, I think the
analyze
gaps
those
analysis.
needs?
It's a funding, you said funding gaps, right? Isn't that what?
It is, yeah,
Yeah,
So that,
because we can't implement, and no one can implement any of this without the funding.
right. So you have to identify where's the current funding. I'll throw an example out. Town of Dolores just got $475,000 grant towards their skate park / mountain bike park. So, that's a big chunk of cash, right? That's gonna create a huge resource to the community, the county, for kids and folks alike. If we can somehow shape together the organizations and the funding behind them that meet whatever components of the goals that we've identified, that'll be a huge thing. Because those agencies, if we're in good collaboration with them, they have the expertise, the knowledge, they've already secured the funding. Let's let them do what they know how to do. And then we identify the gaps. Where are the gaps there, or what other funding? I believe they need another $175,000. How can we help make that happen? So that project isn't done in its entirety, or you name the project, or you name the trail, or whatever it is. I think that would be the way for us to be able to be valuable to the overall efforts and the overall goals and objectives.
I think an additional challenge that I've heard in the last week is there were multiple entities in the county who applied for that GoCo money, so we're competing against each other as well, rather than strategically lining things up to just keep getting money to come in and things like that. So I think there could be a place there.
But I think it serves to have that in a plan somewhere, right? I mean, you pull it out for funding. Those in the grant world, you don't have it written down in a plan, it's gonna be hard to get. And I think the other side of it is just more about
I feel like what we bring in municipality, it's super important that the community understands what the true costs are, what they're asking for. Like, I just went through this whole thing with the GoPro grant, right? And I did as much outreach as I possibly could and didn't step on Dolores' toes, we took a back seat and applied to different.
And Los Ariel is asking for money and.
Well,
you
the
know,
whole thing was like, you know, they were oversubscribed at the state level for just that one grant bucket, like $300 million or something insane, right? So like, it's just an uber competitive zone to be in, and maybe, or maybe just having this information available for like some other organizations that maybe wanna just do some one-off projects that they can pull up, like they own land, like Southwest Center for Independence developed this whole accessible trail up at Cedar Reservoir, and they created a picnic area, and it's just open for, you know, people that need that accessible trail system. So there's probably more than just public lands that could get help, right? County owned lands, municipal owned lands, private, people care about that stuff. Absolutely. Private owned land. Yeah, so.
So what if you change it from, to develop to like, to explain? Or to educate, or, you know, I mean, just, rather than looking at crunching numbers and, hey, this is, you know, solid, but more to explain that it takes money to have outdoor recreation, maintenance, kind of, you know, kind of how the, improvements can plan cost estimates, I don't know.
I think this is so interesting to me because I think I basically better understand why the Chafee plan, like I was disappointed in that part of the plan. Because James has seen my like capital improvements plan. You got every, it's like, it's over analyzed. I don't know, we can keep thinking about it, but I think it almost strikes me that what the problem with calling this a capital improvements plan is that the federal agencies, like you guys have these things. It's called deferred maintenance. And maybe what we're talking about, and like the thing that James is talking about is it's on a different level. It's a different kind of, it's like a meta plan or something. It's not something that you guys are gonna have to be directly accountable. It's more like a advisory.
I guess that's what I heard you say, Jake, is that rather than creating a capital improvements plan, identifying where the funding gaps are and who that funding should go to, who can actually implement it, what these strategies are in our overall plan. Where are the funding gaps to be able to implement those things, and what agency or organization should that funding go to? Along with what are the funding sources?
What could our role as a coalition be, like coordinate those discussions? Just so it makes it easier for people not to compete against each other, and maybe like leverage.
Build alliances. You know, I mean, we have a huge opportunity to build alliances amongst nonprofits, amongst grant holders. And even more importantly, identifying by like user groups in our instance, like how can we not be competitive about providing things for our identified target populations, but more so create a broader experience, broader opportunity or resource for people by bringing those people together, just like we brought all of us together. We're a pretty diverse group, you know? How can we as that group extend that to all these others out there? Seems like a tangible thing in my mind that we can actually make an impact there.
And I also say, I mean, that's almost a perpetual thing. That's almost an annual thing that sort of has to happen and get updated. It's a wish list that, you know, and a needs assessment. I mean, if anybody knows what the Colorado Talent Pipeline report is, it's that kind of thing that comes out every year that says, hey, here are the highest needs, here are projects going on, here are funding gaps, here is, you know, it's a lot of this information in one sort of report that then all these groups, stakeholders, nonprofits, whatever, have access to. So it becomes the resource. we don't do it, we offer all that information. That would be a pretty cool project or pretty cool resource to be able to give our region every year.
So should we, then this, basically, this goal, this 3.1, still has a shot of existing. It's just more, it doesn't, we have to specify that it's not necessarily an agency plan, it's a community plan.
Yes, yeah, I'm all for it.
It's a community plan,
Yes.
and we're not gonna like get in and be the way I am with it. We're gonna be more generalized, and then we're gonna be helpful and
Yes.
identify funding sources and inventory, right? The second, like another inventory, like here's what's available right now. Here's the kind of stuff that is waiting in these grants. Here's our 4 projects, it's matched some of it up. And that's what this group does, is like try to match the opportunities and maybe ferret out. Dolores is thinking about this, Magus is thinking about this, you guys ought to talk to each other. You know, be a good idea to give old Jason a call down there.
The question is, I mean, at some point, are we gonna like advocate for certain projects? If they've gone through our process of, you know, looking at, you know, where there's conflicts with habitats, everything else, you know, where there's needs, where it's gonna be fulfilling our objectives, then we'll give them, you know, the gold gold stamp on this one. It's like, I'm sorry, you only get like a bronze stamp. And we're not gonna, really.
Well, do you want that though, or is that something that is giving you nightmares?
No.
Well, you just have to be clear about your criteria, then that's the next step, you gotta be clear about your criteria. Because you can't seem
Arbitrary.
Arbitrary.
Government.
Yeah, right.
Well, that also gives me some concern about not supporting our, for instance, our trail groups. And handing over some of their goals and needs to this group, so we have to be very careful. Yes.
Well, I'm
You're
gonna,
gonna need for process.
yeah, we have run out of time. I'm gonna work on, I think that my take homes from this are, it's a softer maybe capital improvements is too clinical of a term. It's a softer thing, and it's also iterative, and it's an like what we need is a paradigm. It's like we need to have a tool. Well, Chafee called it a tool. We're ending up in the same place Chafee did with this, which is that they developed a prioritization tool, and they have like a live capital improvements plan and a prioritization tool. So I will redraft.
I'm just gonna make a quick plug to Palmer's in this, not to yet get rid of workforce development and helping create maybe some workforce pathways. And just don't get rid of that yet.
Oh, we won't.
I mean, that's
I
something
think
we've
that
talked
if
about.
there is a way that we can create value for this group,
Yeah.
it's helping create jobs.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna make that plug.
Yeah, no, we're gonna hit that for sure. But I appreciate it.
Thank you all for
Well
hanging out
done.
tonight and all of your input, really appreciate it.
Somebody got hired and I want to go
You guys.
Yeah, I mean, he misses me. They haven't been on it.